Well, S&P has put 15 Euro nations on review for possible downgrade. We're going to bring in Mark Grant from Southwest Securities. And Mark, Europe has been a topic you have talked about more than once a day based on your email distributions, which I always look forward to. But
thank you.
Do you find this curious? I mean, there are many days when I could think of S&P releasing this announcement, but today of all days, we seem to get positive, very positive, concrete reports coming out of Europe.
Well, I mean, I think that's the consensus opinion. My view is that it's one more plan to replace another plan that maybe will happen and maybe not, because I can see Finland or the Netherlands or Austria saying, no, they're not going to turn over their sovereignty to the European Union. But the market certainly took it as a positive. And then, of course, the S&P announcement is just disastrous for Europe.
You know, Mark, you talk to a ton of people in Europe all day long, very influential. So can you try to take us inside, say, what might be happening right now in a minister's office in Austria, where they're saying, wait a minute, we're getting dragged down to this. We're going to lose our AAA because of what's happening. We won't stand for it. Do you think that that kind of conversation is happening right now in Europe?
Oh, there's no question that the lines are burning up between one finance minister and one head of state in Europe and others, and I assure you that they're all awake and paying attention to this. Because if you think this through and just go beyond the headlines for a moment, it wasn't only France that now may be downgraded 2 notches. It was Germany, the bellwether, that may be downgraded. And generally when S&P says maybe, the odds are not 50-50. The odds are about 90-10 that it's forthcoming. And then you have to think through the ramifications of this, which is that every bank now in Europe is also going to be downgraded as the sovereigns are downgraded. Many corporations in Europe will be downgraded. The euro is going to come under tremendous pressure worldwide. So there are just a whole lot of dominoes that are going to fall because of this report.
What about, what do you think this actually means for the ECB as well as for the European Financial Stability Facility, which, you know, it seems a lot of hopes have hinged upon the existence of these somewhat quasi-bailout funds?
Well, they're not going to be AAA rated any longer, Lisa. I mean, one of the implications here, obviously, is that all of the Eurozone agencies like the European Investment Bank and so forth are also going to get downgraded as the nations are downgraded. And as I said, the other huge implication is going to be for the banks in Europe, and they were having tremendous difficulties in funding before, and then we had, of course, the Fed and all the other central banks standing up and trying to ease that situation. But this is just going to make it incredibly difficult to fund the banks in Europe as they get downgraded on the backs of the sovereigns.
Mark, last week we had 6 central banks around the world make it easier for banks around the world to borrow dollars, lowering that swap rate. So do you think that this move today just increases the demand for dollars and they might have to do that again?
Without any question. I think that there's going to be a tremendous move now out of Europe to come into dollar-denominated securities, treasuries, corporates, agencies as a basis of safety and as a basis of preservation of capital, as the European system basically has such systemic problems in terms of the ability to fund. One of the points I've made in my commentary for quite a while, and as you may recall, I first started writing about Europe in January 2010, is that Europe, the main countries, Germany and France, Germany, with the biggest economy, is 1/7 of the United States. The other huge problem in Europe is that, unlike America, where our GDP is 125% of our banks, in Europe it's the opposite. The banks have assets about 3 times or 300% more than the sovereign countries. So everybody is at just huge risk, and you can think Iceland, you can think Ireland, and realize the systemic nature of the problem that's confronting Europe right now.
Mark, I want to bring it back home because clearly the U.S. is not really out of the woods yet as it relates to debt debates. The S&P, the market shrugged off S&P's downgrade of U.S. long-term debt. Do you think we're likely to see a part 2 of that downgrade in August?
Well, I think that America's financial condition, even giving the politics, is a much different dynamic than Europe, without any question. And consequently, when the Fed moves or we have one country, we don't have 17 countries that are having tremendous problems in terms of growth. And as a matter of fact, the recession now, because of the higher cost of borrowing, because of the S&P announcement, is going to be worse than I think what people thought yesterday. So you're going to have a worse recession in Europe, and while it hasn't particularly affected the United States yet, in my view, during the next quarter, the United States and the numbers for the growth in the United States are going to be down because of our relationship with Europe and because of the interbank funding rates that will affect everyone.
All right, Mark, we have to leave it there. Do appreciate you joining us on such short notice on the phone. Always good to hear from you. Of course, that was Mark Grant of Southwest Securities opining on S&P's decision today to put 15 euro nations on credit watch negative.